After 10 years of love, she reached out. We reconnected, but when feelings surfaced, she shut me out. I blocked her, then she unblocked me. I encountered her during high school. It was not love at first sight. I was simply engrossed in my own world, attending to my own concerns until, over the course of days, weeks, and months, I began to notice her. Since that moment, I made attempts to get closer to her. We exchanged texts and spoke occasionally, though very infrequently, and I can vividly recall the moments when our eyes met in class. At that time, she was engaged. When she broke off her engagement, I began to make my move and endeavored to get closer to her. However, after 2 years of effort on my part, she started dating another guy. Upon discovering this, I removed her from my life entirely. I deleted her number, cleared our chats, ceased socializing with friends when she was around, and ultimately stopped attending school altogether. I lost 2 years, not only due to this situation, though I did finish school with a respectable grade. Regardless, it was truly painful for me. Whenever I went out, I almost anticipated her emerging from the crowd or catching a glimpse of her hair peeking out from a car door. I thought about her for approximately 5 years. I attempted to meet other girls, but I constantly found myself pausing because I was still thinking of her. Eventually, I stopped trying to meet other girls and completely lost interest in the dating scene. After that day, I never attempted to contact her again. I never searched for her on social media, nothing. To cope with everything, I began to persuade myself, in my mind, that she was unattractive, had a poor character, or that we simply weren't meant to be together. I thought of things like this to distance myself from her. After years, I somewhat forgot her. Those fleeting moments when she would cross my mind were met with thoughts of her being unattractive, and I continued on with my life. That was until about 6 months ago. She sent me a friend request. I could hardly believe it. I genuinely thought I was starting to hallucinate. After staring at that request for several minutes, pondering its implications, I accepted it. We began conversing. It felt as though we had never lost touch. Our conversations resumed as if we had known each other for a lifetime, filled with jokes and updates about our lives. She mentioned that she had been in a relationship for 7 years, but that it had come to an end. On one of the first days we communicated, she sent me an audio message in which she laughed, and somehow, the illusion I had built around her, all the reasoning I had constructed to convince myself she was unworthy, crumbled. I experienced a flood of emotions. It was quite strange, to be honest. In that moment, I realized I still loved her. So I decided to make one last attempt, approaching it with greater maturity and a fresh perspective compared to when I was in high school. I did everything within my power. I made it clear that I was not interested in being just her friend. After all, when I cut her from my life, the final message I had sent her was precisely that. I can't be close to you this way. I can't just be your friend. I cared for her in a way that no one reading this could possibly understand, but I could never settle for merely being her friend. She understood my perspective from the outset. From there, everything progressed smoothly. We messaged each other daily at all hours. I struggled to sleep well because I was waiting for her messages, often waking up quickly to check my phone. After about 4 months, I sensed that our relationship was stagnating. I wasn't sure if it was due to me, or if she was dealing with something, which she actually was. But I started to fear losing her again, so I began to share my feelings. I requested that she not hurt me again and asked her to be honest if she was seeing someone else. I would be willing to step back. I am not sure why I said this, as it is not in my nature to give up, but I feared finding out she was dating someone else without my knowledge. And here is where things became complicated. Initially, she said she just needed time due to her past relationship. I reassured her that I didn't mean to pressure her, but I was also terrified of experiencing the same situation as a decade ago, me pursuing her, only to discover she was dating someone else. She insisted it was not like before. A few days later, I brought up my feelings again. Probably I did so incorrectly, but in that context, I felt compelled to express my emotions. Ultimately, she shared that she was still in love with her ex, stating that she wouldn't have spoken to me if she had known how I felt, and that she had no interest in me, deeming me a waste of her time. I told her to block me then, especially if there would never be any potential for developing a relationship between us. Yet, she never did. She only grew colder, still responding, and still apologizing if she didn't reply within hours because she was busy. However, our conversations became minimal. She stopped sharing details about her days and never wanted to watch movies together online again. Nothing. I attempted to address this with her, asking multiple times over the past month to communicate normally. I was subtly suggesting that I could accept being her sort of friend, putting my other feelings aside, simply to connect, to converse, perhaps even to hang out, though not as a date, as I specified. But she remained emotionally distant. She never agreed to go out with me. I invited her after 3 months to watch a movie together about once a week or biweekly. One day, I was in her area and asked her to hang out for just 10 minutes to say hello, but she replied that she was far from home that day. I initially thought it was an excuse, but she truly was. Still, it seemed that she was unwilling to go out for a movie because she claimed she wasn't ready. I don't know. Fast forward to today, we no longer message each other every day. She never reaches out to me, and at times, I haven't texted her for 3 or 4 days, trying to resist the urge to do so, and she never initiated contact. I eventually sent her one last message, trying to break the stalemate. I told her I understood what she was experiencing regarding her past relationship and reiterated that there was no pressure. I merely wanted her to communicate with me normally. She responded that she did not feel anything for me. She literally said, "I already told you." But I believe she meant it differently, and that I was becoming irritating to her. So I sent her one final message. I told her I would free her from me, expressing that I hated her and that I would never be the friend she could reach out to after months, just when she felt like it. She explicitly stated she did this with her friends. I mentioned that I felt a weight on my chest due to her coldness, and that it had been a beautiful mistake, because reaching out to her over the past months was a dream come true for me. Then I sent her an old photo of us, blurred with the caption, "Always," a reference to Severus Snape's love for Lily in the Harry Potter series, asserting that she would never find anyone who felt for her the way I do. Then I blocked her. I saw that she blocked me in return once she read the message I sent her. At that moment, I believed it was truly over. A part of me found peace and acceptance. As I was reflecting on the chat and everything that had transpired, she unblocked me again. Now I am utterly confused. I understand that I've focused on the most significant aspects, but we genuinely enjoyed each other's company and spent hours talking. The disagreements arose later and were only a fraction of our conversations and good times together. So please don't misconstrue this as a toxic relationship. We are both generally easygoing, at least until my last message. I must reiterate, I am truly perplexed. Why did she not keep me blocked? Why does she keep that door slightly ajar? It would have made things so much easier for both of us if, since she claimed she wasn't feeling anything for me, she had definitively closed that door. Why give me hope? I possess a certain character trait. When I perceive something as worth fighting for, I never yield as long as there is a possibility, as long as there is hope, and she is one of those exceedingly rare cases. Now, it feels like I am living in hell. These past 5 days have dragged on endlessly. I cannot stop thinking about her. I have cried extensively and found myself lying in bed with no motivation or energy for anything. I simply slept, pondered the situation, slept again, then began talking to AI about it and writing in my smartphone notes. When I manage to get up, I distract myself with activities, but suddenly she reappears in my thoughts, and I break down in tears like a fool. I want to clarify that I do not cry easily. I'm not overly emotional. This situation brings out this reaction in me, and I know I shouldn't let it. I have tried to comprehend why I am behaving this way. The conclusion I reached is that perhaps I resent the idea that I will grow old and she will never be a part of my life, or I cannot accept not just her disinterest, but also her choice to exclude me by acting coldly and not providing me a chance to see her in real life or to communicate. Maybe she avoided these things to prevent further complications. I can't say. But why? Why act in this way? I understand that everyone is different, but I previously told her that if someone loved me for the same length of time, 10 years, I would at least give them a chance, regardless of my feelings for them. I would reach out to get to know them, without expectations and with various boundaries, but I would. She has never been able to respond to me. In any case, this situation is difficult for me. I'm uncertain how you perceive what I've written. Some concepts may not be received in the way I intend. English is not even my first language, so I apologize for any errors. Believe me, if it ever crosses your mind, this is not a physical obsession for me. It is not merely a crush, and I am not a weirdo. I had a friend with whom I severed ties after learning that he had been stalking a girl he liked for several weeks, and one time he even asked me to accompany him to see what she was doing. What was that about? Additionally, I have an interest in crime, behavior, and body language, and I understand what it means to be a creep. I don't consider myself one. While I may be immature in some ways, and I may have made mistakes, I am not a creep in any shape or form. I have never stalked her. I have only ever attempted to communicate with her now. I don't even know why I feel the need to clarify this. The fact that she never accepted going out with me made me feel somehow criminalized. It is a strange connection. Well, ultimately, I have argued with myself about my feelings for her over the past 10 years, and the conclusion I reached is that, in its purest form, this is true love. So here I am. I probably already know what you will suggest to me. I understand that I should take a step back, especially since she has had ample opportunities to reach out to me. I realize that I ought to concentrate on myself, distract myself, and gradually let go. I know I probably don't deserve to be viewed as her second choice at best, but I can't help it. I feel a connection to this individual that is so profound it troubles me. I have even found myself dreaming about her. How can I cease thinking about her if I dream of her? One part of me understands that I must let go. Yet another part, the one that clings to hope, remains, harboring the same uncontrollable desire to message her. I feel foolish for having opened up to her in this manner. It is even more disheartening to realize that I would, at best, be her second choice. I am unsure if I should share this here. Partly due to how you may react to it and partly because, I don't know, it just feels somewhat wrong. But I needed to express this, and I won't take offense. I'm not as vulnerable as I may appear in the text above. If anything, this will aid me in growing. At the very least, writing about all of this for minutes or hours has been somewhat cathartic, even if only temporarily. In any case, I cannot promise that I will heed your advice, but I will read all of it and reflect deeply on it. Thank you if you took the time to read everything. And please let me know if you have ever experienced something similar regarding someone. Story 2. I, 27F, don't know if I should stay with my 45M boyfriend, but I think I took him in too deep. Too much has happened. Help. I, a 27-year-old female, have been in a relationship with my 45-year-old boyfriend for 6 years. While I understand my feelings, I am uncertain about how to move forward, whether to stay together or to part ways. Both options seem like incorrect choices. Even typing this now causes my stomach to churn. I believe this situation relates as much to my identity as a person as it does to the problems we face in our relationship. Here's a brief overview about me. I led a very wild, turbulent, and chaotic life before meeting my boyfriend, to the extent that I do not remember several years of my past. I have experienced numerous lives in my lifetime. For instance, I once lived as a criminal, engaging in reckless behavior, but one day I awakened with the desire to be famous. 6 months later, I had amassed a significant online following, began modeling, appeared on magazine covers, featured in 3 movies, and almost began dating a high-profile celebrity before backing out and cutting off communication with him. I abandoned that life upon meeting my current boyfriend because he referred to me as an attention seeker. Upset by his comment, I deleted all my social media accounts and ghosted my manager and agent. I am a determined individual who can always find a silver lining in any circumstance, and I have never feared starting anew. However, now, walking away from this relationship wouldn't merely impact my boyfriend and me. My father traveled for work and persuaded me to join him, which I accepted, as it allowed me to maintain my previous lifestyle while earning more money. It was an easy choice. My boyfriend worked with my father, and that is how we met. During the traveling job, our relationship began as something fun. I was 21 and adventurous, while he was 39 and recently separated from his ex-wife. The initial 3 years of our relationship were long distance, living on opposite sides of the country. We spent time together at work for a few weeks to several months, followed by periods of no face-to-face contact for up to 6 months. Those 3 years were filled with toxicity, and honestly, I am unsure if it ever ceased to be toxic or if my spirit simply broke over time. When our relationship became more serious, He informed his ex-wife that they had separated and needed to finalize their divorce, as they had both moved on, and she had even introduced her new boyfriend to her kids. Although this may seem tangential, I assure you it is relevant. I have never felt close to my extended family, apart from my parents, but that's a story for another day. Anyway, towards the end of those 3 long-distance years, my father became gravely ill and passed away. He was my best friend, and since his death 4 years ago, I have struggled with that loss daily. That was also the year I packed up and relocated across the country to be with my boyfriend. I attempt to avoid thinking about my father because I have yet to forgive my boyfriend for his actions at the end of my father's life, and I doubt I ever will. Had I not been overwhelmed with grief at that time, I might not have moved or continued the relationship with him. My boyfriend and father had a fantastic relationship. My dad was not a sociable person and disliked most people, yet he adored my boyfriend. They would talk on the phone, spend time together outside of work, and became friends without my presence. I did not work while my dad was hospitalized, and every morning I would enter his hospital room where he would greet me with the same words. "There's the sunshine of my life, how is?" He inquired about my boyfriend every single day. Despite being long distance, one evening my boyfriend was working nearby and visited me late, almost 11 p.m. when we passed the hospital where my father was. I informed him that my dad wished to see him, but he declined, stating it was too late and that he did not want to disturb him. I told him my dad was awake, as he was often undergoing transfusions, but he remained adamant about visiting next time. I let it go because deep down, I knew that there wouldn't be another opportunity, so I dropped him back off at his vehicle. Later that year, I moved across the country, and that is when turmoil truly began. His divorce from his ex-wife was long, contentious, and unpleasant. If someone claimed that she was the Antichrist, I would tend to agree. Upon discovering my move, she became furious, taking me to court to prevent me from dating him. They have 5 children together, and one of his younger kids had access to his old phone to play games. She confiscated it, hacked into his iCloud, and disseminated nude photos of me everywhere. She even found my mother's Facebook page and subsequently contacted my aunts and uncles, sending them those images. Additionally, she decided to stop him from seeing his children, prolonging the divorce process further. My boyfriend has a terrible habit of ignoring advice. Regardless of whether I or his attorney advises him, he often does not take it and subsequently becomes furious, blaming me for his problems with seeing his children and the collapse of his life. He has attributed this to me more times than I can recall. The final time he accused me, I warned him that if he said it again, I would leave him. Once their divorce concluded, they managed to be civil, and I became an integral part of his children's lives, which I cherish. After my relocation, my mother was left alone in my hometown, prompting her to sell her house and move here. Things escalated when his ex and her boyfriend resumed their relationship, and she attempted reconciliation with my boyfriend. When he refused, the cycle of preventing him from seeing his children began anew. This has persisted for the past year, and he has become disheartened with trying to communicate with her. With court proceedings resuming in a few days, I am unsure if I can handle it again. If our relationship were stronger, I think it would not trouble me as much. I love my boyfriend and he loves me. However, I feel that throughout the past year we have both fallen out of love. He is extremely difficult to communicate with, always convinced he is right, and consistently finds a way to blame every issue on me. While I do not claim to be faultless, I believe that it takes 2 to create problems. I aim to care for him, spoiling him with little acts of kindness, but I have created a dependency where he does nothing for himself. Our work dynamics are quite unusual. Our boss signs checks in a checkbook, which we then write ourselves. Even in the midst of tasks, he interrupts me to fill out our paychecks, even when they are right in front of him. For instance, last night, I was comfortably reading on the couch when he interrupted me, asking me to come upstairs to find the TV remote, which was on the nightstand where it consistently resides. I became so frustrated the other day that I had to leave the house to avoid a confrontation. He was going to the gas station, and we had run out of sugar. Knowing I wouldn't have enough for another cup of coffee, I asked if he could pick up a box while he was out, and he questioned whether I truly needed it or if it could wait. As much as I want to care for him, it feels overwhelmingly one-sided. As I stated before, I tend to find the silver lining in any situation, but he seems to revel in complaining. Just last night, one of our neighbors had a limousine pick them up, and he criticized the driver for struggling to back out of their driveway while other drivers were honking. Did it impact us? No, yet he stood at the window, complaining. His primary grievance is our sex life, which is nearly non-existent. I regret to admit that I do not wish to engage in sexual relations with him. While the act itself feels adequate, I have not achieved orgasm in 8 years. He occasionally asks if I finished, and I lie, saying that I did, to avoid discussing it with him. He may not last long, but that is not the most concerning aspect. I have repeatedly expressed my disinterest in having sex because it feels so cold and lacking in emotion. I have asked him many times to be more affectionate, to kiss me at least, and while I receive that sporadically after a period without sex, it is not frequent. There is no foreplay whatsoever. The routine during intimate moments involves me entering the room. He instructs me to undress. I fetch a towel, return, undress, and resort to moistening my hand to adequately facilitate things due to the absence of foreplay. Then it quickly ends, often within 2 minutes. I merely go through the motions because I know it will be brief, and it is preferable to dealing with his attitude. Being around him has become exhausting. I feel a lift in my mood whenever he leaves the house. I acknowledge that I have spent much time criticizing him, but I genuinely care for him. When he is cheerful and in a good mood, being with him feels like pure bliss. He is kind and humorous, and I yearn for time to stand still. Unfortunately, those moments are infrequent. I find myself at a crossroads, torn between love and the realization that I should not tie my happiness to his moods. I also recognize that if I opt to end this relationship, it will be the most challenging decision I have ever made. Although we are not married, we share a joint bank account, our names are on the mortgage of the house we are buying, and we have a dog whom I adore but could not take from him. It has not even been a year since my mother relocated here, and I am very fond of his children. I worry about how he would manage if I left. I would bet my left leg that he does not even know which website to visit to pay our mortgage or utilities. I am aware that he loves me, and my departure would devastate him. I anticipate that the upcoming court dates with his ex will strain our relationship, likely leading to renewed arguments like we experienced in the past. Now, I am trying to determine whether I should fight to salvage this relationship or walk away when that time arrives, which I know it will. The thought of being apart from him is heartbreaking. I love him deeply, but all the grievances I have voiced are matters I have attempted to address with him. I am also apprehensive that I may just be experiencing yet another phase of wanting change and would regret leaving him in the long run. Story 3. I cut off my sister-in-law after work turmoil and personal strain. Now her family's pressuring me to reconcile for her pregnancy. I am posting this here because I need external advice. My husband is extremely supportive of my choices and the importance of maintaining my own peace, even if it necessitates distancing myself from his sister. Here's the story. I will attempt to condense it. My husband has 2 sisters, one younger and one older, making him the middle child. I love his sisters as if they were my own. Over time, his younger sister has become my best friend since we share many interests. I met my husband when I was 18 years old, and I am now 31. When the COVID-19 pandemic began, we moved in with his younger sister. She started dating shortly after exiting a toxic relationship and quickly entered another one. A year later, she decided to move him in with her. We were splitting the rent 50-50, with my husband not working at the time. When she made the decision to move her boyfriend into the house, she planned to continue charging me the same amount in rent, despite my having paid for the internet myself, which was close to $120. I thought we would negotiate an arrangement given the 3 incomes in the house. However, from her perspective, that was not an option. Therefore, my husband and I decided to move out. She did not kick us out, but at the time, my husband suggested that she effectively did without explicitly saying so. I wanted to move out to provide her with some privacy. After that incident, her entire family was upset with her. I reassured them that my decision was independent, even though I felt like she had put us in a difficult situation. But ultimately, I wanted her to be happy. A month after we moved out, she requested rent and bill money, which left me bewildered because rent is typically paid before the month begins. I had confirmed that my last payment was made upon moving out, and she had agreed. So when she texted me, I was completely confused. I had to arrange a deposit and first month's rent for my new place, and she had already welcomed her boyfriend and his sister into the house, with all three of them splitting bills. I was not afforded the same offer for me and her brother, which was acceptable to me, but fast forward a few months. A couple of months later, she quit her job, and I offered her a position where I worked. I was the general manager there and had worked hard to attain that role. From the very beginning, I outlined the pay structure, lack of benefits, and time-off policies, and she agreed and accepted the job. However, a few months into her employment, she began to complain about our boss because he sometimes got worked up over issues. She stopped performing her job effectively, which started to affect my responsibilities as the general manager. My boss frequently wanted me to be informed about her performance. I always covered for her because we had worked together for 2 years. In the final year, we hired a new assistant manager who worked under me. She was a great employee and earned her position through hard work. The three of us formed a strong friendship, especially with the assistant manager and me, as we had a lot in common due to our heritage and values. It was an instant connection. Last year, my wonderful father-in-law passed away. Right before that, my sister-in-law and husband had a significant argument because my husband pointed out that she was acting differently and seemed closed off. I ended up arguing with my husband to defend her. While I felt similarly, especially since she began dating her new boyfriend, she had always been somewhat open with me. I chose to focus on the positives. However, her boyfriend truly stressed her out, both financially and emotionally. Nonetheless, she wanted to be with him, and we are all adults now. She is capable of making her own decisions, and I have always supported her. I took up crocheting, and it really took off. Everyone loved my new skill. She immediately saw the attention I received and jumped in as well. While we always shared mutual interests, she began to appear very money-driven in this field. I even stopped crocheting because she made me uncomfortable. If I created something, she would copy it and sell it. I eventually got over that because we had a challenging year. Her snide comments and judgmental looks never affected me. She always claimed I was her best friend, and I genuinely saw her as mine. Some days she would come to work and say nothing. Other days, she would be very cheerful. On other occasions, it seemed like my single status irritated her. She would slam things around, making sure we noticed her frustration. One day, she texted my assistant manager and me, expressing that she felt excluded from our friendship. I felt sad and ensured that even in our conversations, we included her. I made an effort every day to include her, but it was never sufficient. She would become upset and remain silent all day. If my assistant manager asked if it was okay for her to come over, I would agree. Then my sister-in-law would get upset and leave for the day without saying a word. Anytime she caught us discussing plans without her, she would be displeased. Accordingly, my assistant manager and I discussed ways to include her more, but her boyfriend seemed to prevent her from being present. My assistant manager's lifestyle is quite different, and I suspect that my sister-in-law did not approve and judged her for it. As flu season approached, everyone began falling ill. My assistant manager lost her voice, and shortly thereafter, I contracted the flu. My sister-in-law has always had an odd attitude towards sickness. She wants everyone to avoid spreading germs to her. So when she saw us unwell, she became upset but still wanted to be around us. I took a few days off and returned to find that she was now sick. She was unhappy and continued to come to work despite my recommendation that she stay home, just as I had done. Her excuses always revolved around not having sick days left or insurance to justify being off work. None of us could afford to be off, but we have to stay home sometimes. Eventually, she ended up sick for 2 weeks. My assistant manager sent her a message in a group chat suggesting that she check her attitude, as she did not seem well. This led to a blow-up where she unleashed a barrage of hurtful comments at her and exited the chat. The next day at work, she arrived early to move her belongings away from us in the office. That was not going to be acceptable in my role as general manager. We still needed to work together. If she did not like us, that was her prerogative, but she still needed to communicate with us. Consequently, I called a meeting to address the issues and was willing to let her work from home. She then exploded, stating she only wanted a professional relationship. I was taken aback and asked her 3 times, "We are family. Can we discuss this?" She insisted that she did not want to engage with me, repeating it 3 times. I understood that she sometimes felt left out, but for her to escalate the matter to this level was astonishing. We had always communicated well. I allowed her to leave and work from home for the remainder of the week. The following day, she expressed a desire to talk, but honestly, I was upset. I suggested we speak the following week, as I wanted to respect her and gather my thoughts. When the next week arrived, she never approached me. That weekend, I visited my in-laws where she was also present. There, she shared that she was pregnant and looked at me, saying, "Usually, I would be excited, but given everything we've been through, I can't simply start fresh without having a conversation." Now she is 4 months pregnant, and everyone is urging me to reconcile with her. My poor mother-in-law is pleading with me to attend the gender reveal party, which I intend to skip. Her actions have impacted my work significantly. My boss and assistant manager lost respect for me because they believed I never held my sister-in-law accountable for her responsibilities, fearing I might upset her, and this affected the company. She tends to explode or walk away when faced with displeasure, leaving me to walk on eggshells constantly. Eventually, I resigned from my position. Upon learning of my departure, she submitted her notice on the same day. After I left, I avoided her for 2 months. However, during the anniversary of my father-in-law's passing, we encountered each other again. I always greet her, but she responds loudly enough for everyone to hear, hoping to show she's not angry. I addressed all the issues I had with her, but we have not spoken since. I genuinely do not want to engage in conversation. My husband has been my pillar of support, so am I in the wrong for cutting her off? As a result, I have had to limit my time with my other wonderful sister-in-law, mother-in-law, and my niece and nephew, which deeply saddens me. Should I attend the gender reveal and attempt to make peace, or maintain my distance? For reference, my husband has advised me not to go and to distance myself, as it bothers him that his family does not acknowledge my feelings. I am very close to his family, and I have even discussed this issue with my older sister-in-law and mother-in-law. However, once they learned about my younger sister-in-law's pregnancy, they essentially disregarded my concerns and began urging me to be the bigger person. Story 4. Mom's overwhelmed as I underpays her for childcare, leaving me feeling abandoned. I want her help, but it shows no concern. The title of this is misleading since I have not yet addressed my sister, but I was unsure how else to label this. Here is some context. My mother cares for my 18-month-old niece during the weekdays and has been doing so since my niece was 1 year old. When she began, my niece was my mother's only grandchild. My mother and I reside in the same town, while my sister lives more than an hour away from us. Therefore, she stays at their home during the week, returns home on Friday night, and then goes back on Sunday night. To clarify, I will refer to my sister as A. I have 2 other sisters involved in this situation, who I will denote as B and C. The ages are a 28, B 27, C 25, and I am the youngest at 23. All of my sisters live in close proximity to one another 20-30 minutes apart, and it is an area with a significantly high cost of living. My mother and I live in a small town, where we all grew up, located approximately 1.5 hours away. A compensates my mother poorly for the area, totaling only 40 hours, while expecting her to be at their home on Sunday evenings, without pay, so that it can have peace of mind knowing she will be there when my niece wakes up. The payment arrangement is quite complex, but essentially, A has an incredible deal with my mother serving as her full-time nanny at an exceptionally low rate. She saves easily a couple of $1,000s. Now, let me explain why I believe she is being selfish. My mother is a 65-year-old, single woman who frequently feels overwhelmed with her finances, time management, and various projects. Additionally, she is very engaged in her church and dedicates most of her free time to assisting others there. She is technically retired, having been a stay-at-home mom for most of our lives, but after my parents' divorce, she found herself with limited job opportunities. Even so, she is not a retired individual who is set. She still needs to work, and unfortunately, I believe she will continue doing so for the rest of her life. She could find a job in our town, but chose to be my niece's nanny because it was her preference. She has been caring for my niece for about 8 months and has struggled to maintain order in her own home for months because she spends the entire week at A's residence. A is well aware of my mother's frustration. I have had multiple discussions with her about this, as well as with my mother. I do not know A's entire perspective on this matter, only some things she has shared with me. Mostly, she expresses discomfort with my mother feeling so overwhelmed while being the caretaker for my niece, but in her own words, "We don't have any better options for my daughter because we don't want to put her in daycare. Currently, I have a 2-month-old son, B has a 3-month-old daughter, and A and her husband are attempting to have a second child." My mother informed that she needed to stop nannying in June, which would mark a full year, and requested if she could continue until October if she got Mondays off. I believe my mother verbally agreed to this, but she is second-guessing her decision and still wishes to stop in June. I was pregnant last month, but unfortunately, she lost the baby this week. I am uncertain how far along she was, but I understand it was early on. Regardless, she believed October would be a more appropriate end date for my mother, as she hoped to have another child by then. My mother will begin taking Mondays off next week, allowing her more time at home, and my niece will stay at B's house during the day since B is also a stay-at-home mom. Even with an additional day at home, my mother still wants to finish in June, but struggles to assert her boundaries with a due to their strained relationship. Here lies my dilemma. I have a 2-month-old and no family nearby to rely on during the week. My husband is a fantastic father and husband, but he frequently works overtime and cannot assist me during his work hours. I selfishly desire for my mother to conclude her time at A's in June. I want her here to help me occasionally and to be nearby if I need her. She stayed with us for a week when my niece was a newborn, and my brother-in-law returned to work. Since my mother is at A's house during the week, she has been more present for B in her postpartum period and has visited several times to provide assistance. My mother has managed to come to my house a handful of times to support us, but mostly she sleeps on our couch to cover night feedings before leaving in the morning. A part of me feels saddened that my son cannot bond with her, as he might if she were not constantly expected to be out of town. I feel deprived of having my mother around when I genuinely need her. While I do not feel entitled to her presence, it is painful to see that she was available to my sisters in their times of need, but not to me. Setting my personal feelings aside, it appears that it is taking advantage of my mother's assistance, underpaying her, expressing dissatisfaction with her quirks while admitting she is the best option for childcare, and trying to keep her longer than she desires, all the while knowing she needs to return home for her own well-being. This concern has troubled me for a long time, even before my son was born, but now my feelings of abandonment appear to be fueling my anger. From what I gather, A wishes to avoid daycare for her daughter, but is unwilling to pay the actual expenses associated with a full-time nanny. Additionally, she is not prepared to be a stay-at-home mother. Her husband works as an electrician, so it is not a financial issue. She simply does not want to relinquish her career. Whatever choices mothers make for their families are none of my business, and I harbor no judgment toward her for that decision. However, I do not believe one can have everything they desire without consequences. A has managed to do so for the past 8 months because my mother loves her and her daughter, yet she is depleting herself in the process. I have attempted to discuss this with C, but she always defends A. She is the least confrontational person I have ever encountered, so that does not surprise me, but I feel as though I am the only one who recognizes how much A is capitalizing on our mother's support. B and A share a close bond, and I do not feel comfortable bringing this issue up with B without turning it into a group discussion. This has occurred before when B insisted we all discuss matters together. I strongly believe in not ignoring problems. I care for A deeply and do not want our relationship to become tainted by underlying resentment. At the same time, she has just experienced a miscarriage, so I feel it would be wise to wait a while before broaching the subject. I am simply protective of my mother. Our father was extremely abusive, which has conditioned her to allow herself to be walked all over to maintain peace. This has also influenced her relationships with me and my sisters, as my mother remained with him for an extended period. There are numerous issues at play, but I do not believe my mother's actions justify A's exploitation of her. Therefore, my questions are, should I voice my concerns regarding A's apparent disregard for our mother's well-being to A? If so, how can I do that without making her feel threatened? Or should I simply refraining from intervening? Apologies for the lengthy message and any confusion it may cause. I needed to express this to someone other than my mother. My husband largely refrains from commenting, other than acknowledging my feelings of frustration and hurt. Thank you in advance to anyone who makes it through this entire account.